Jacksonville Jaguars have a new head coach and new general manager as they enter the 2025 offseason. My name's Tyler, here with my brother Ryan, and we're going to try and help them out with our first ever mock free agency for the Jaguars in this 2025 offseason. Before we get into it, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, tackle that bell, and while you're at it, leave a like and a comment. Let us know what you want to see the Jaguars do this offseason. So, Ryan, let's pull up the free agents that they have so far, according to Over the Cap. And quick side note, too, James Gladstone is their new GM. And if there's ever a guy that looks British, and it's this guy, James Gladstone. I mean, it's the most British name as well. He's not. He's from Missouri, as I just found that out. But I was just cracking up at it. But I have full confidence in this guy's ability to be general manager. I would think probably some of the best drafting teams over the past couple seasons has been the Los Angeles Rams. And if you go and look at this guy's resume, uh, senior assistant to general manager, player personnel coordinator for the Rams in 2018 before being promoted to director of scouting strategy from 2019 to 2020. Gladstone then became director of scouting in 2021 before being named to his role of director of scouting strategy in 2022. So he is the guy that is watching all the top players. And this is a guy that's taken Puka Nacua, Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, Byron Young, Steve Avila. All if you go talk to Rams players, these are like the top core guys that they're drafting on. I guess especially to some of those guys were top 2 round picks, but still he
Yeah.
chose them and he hit them well. So I think drafting for the Jags, I think is going to improve overall. And I think it's going to start off here though. Who do they want to keep moving forward as they now have like this whole new regime change? And luckily for them, there's not too many guys here that I really think are crucial guys. 2 guys we'll talk about in a little bit more. I mean, Brandon Scherf and Andre Cisco, more just for continuity's sake. Well, continuity for the offensive line, but I think Andre Cisco has some potential. Ryan, anybody else do you see here from this list that potentially could be guys that they could save?
Um, Honestly, not really. I mean, if Mac Jones doesn't get like starting quarterback or like a potential to go be a starting quarterback somewhere, I feel like he could potentially return as the backup again. I feel like he would be one of the better backups in the league. But yeah, there's not really a whole lot there that I'm really like just dying to re-sign and bring back. So I mean, all in all, I like let's just kind of jump into some of
Yeah.
their moves that we made for them already. So hold on, let me get it. There it is.
And real
All right.
quick, while you're getting that up, so the Jags are coming into this, according to Over the Cap, just shy of $40 million in
Yeah.
cap space. So we're trying to get that up, but also just trying to get wasted money off
Yeah.
of the cap space here. So Ryan, who are some of the cap casualties that we selected for the
Christian
Jags?
Kirk is one. So he was just cut regularly. It actually gives them about $6 million more next year in the 2026 offseason to go out and sign players. But yeah, just after that first season, he's been injured a ton, has been a little bit disappointing, and so I feel like going and getting or getting that money back and adding it on to this year's offseason, I think is going to be really important. There were also trade talks about him at the trade deadline this past season, but like right before he broke his collarbone, I believe. And so
Mhm.
that was just unfortunate timing for the Jags not to be able to reap any benefits from that. Then the other one is going to be Evan Ingram. So if they release him with a post June 1st designation, it saves about $15.5 million on this year's cap, and then gives them, I think, a little bit extra on next year's cap as well. And then I believe that's really it. Oh no, Josh Reynolds. They can save 4.25 million just by cutting him
Yeah.
outright. And
Yeah.
so I think you definitely take that for a 30-year-old football player. I would take the 4.25, invest that into other players that are going to come in and do that. And that's going to be a little contradictory based off the first internal free agent that we re-signed. But I think it makes sense just to release him. You don't owe him anything, and get that money and add it onto this year's cap.
Well, and if anything too, you can always just re-sign him as well, but you're trying to
Yeah,
find the best value that you can. So,
yeah,
um, paying him $4.2 million, that could be a couple of bench warmer players or that you can end up signing if you want to take a splash and try and get a guy long term as well. So I think there's a couple other guys that we didn't end up including, but Ronald Darby could be a guy that they potentially end up moving on from, but we'll have to kind of wait and see how they end up valuing that defense. And so, um, but I think the only one that I think Christian Kirk and Josh Reynolds, those almost might be. Christian Kirk's not a sure thing, but I feel like it's very close, especially too if they were trying to shop him as well. And he's been injured the past couple of years also. And you just go look at this money. I think they can go bring in
Yeah.
some guys as well to help replace and build around that we'll talk about here in a second. But Evan Ingram, the reason why I went with Evan Ingram is he has been hurt a little bit, and especially too if you go look out. Actually, for most of his career, he's been hurt a lot. I think he really only had the 1 year, like his best year, where he was healthy for a majority of the time. But I also too, Brenton Strange, he was technically like the number 2 receiver of when it comes to total yards throughout last season, and I think you can go and replace. I think he can replace Evan Ingram, so I think you can clear up this money and use it elsewhere to try and help rebuild this roster. And you're going to be going through a whole rebuilding phase as well. So I think you can move on from Evan Ingram, save this 16 million. What would it be if they just ended up cutting him as well if they didn't want to use it post June 1st?
It would not be nearly as much, I believe. So they would only save
At,
about 6 million.
it's still 6 million. There might be
Yeah.
some things that come along with the post June 1st cut, but we'll kind of wait and see. Also, too, they can maybe take him into training camp, and then if Brenton Strange just looks better, just move on from him, and then you can save
Yeah.
that money from there. So, but Ryan, there's a couple of guys that we did end up signing, and I guess the 2 names that I mentioned already. But
Yeah.
why Brandon Scherf and Andre Cisco, and how much do they get paid?
So we brought back Brandon Sheriff just because you look, I think tackle is going to be something that they potentially want to not necessarily replace because Walker Little and Anton Harrison are decent
But
tackles.
yeah,
But that offensive line, you're already losing Cam Robinson. And I know they played some games without him, so it's a little bit different. And they got draft capital for him. But I do think you want to make sure that there's a lot of continuity on that offensive line and bringing back Brandon Sheriff for another year, just a 1 year, $10 million deal. I think can kind of help do that. And Andre Cisco, just a good safety. I think in that secondary, you have a good player there, and you're going to want to add corners to that group and maybe even another safety. But I think you don't want to let a guy like that walk. So I believe he got a 3 year, $24 million deal, and Brandon Sheriff just got a 1 year, $10 million deal.
yeah, and Brandon Sheriff too, like being that right guard, and you're right, like with the struggles overall, just throughout the entire offensive line, and then even two sitting at 5, even if you go get a guy like Will Campbell, just having that consistency at right guard, be like, okay, let's try Will Campbell out at left tackle or left guard, or maybe throw him in at center. Like they try and figure
Yeah.
this out if they want to go with a guy like Will Campbell at number 5 overall. So still just keep that continuity, someone that Trevor Lawrence is familiar with, while you're still trying to rebuild that offensive line. Because in theory, if Anton Harrison and Walker Little can stay healthy and they can keep on developing, and then you go and get Will Campbell, that's a pretty solid off, not the best, but pretty solid offensive line that you're starting to build there. And you're just trying to hope that, I guess, that people stay healthy, but every team worries about that throughout
Yeah.
the entire season. So that puts them at about $52 million. Like they maybe go up a little bit more. Maybe they re-sign some of these guys. We didn't end up going through any of the like bottom tier, like league minimum type guys, because all that money just gets traded back and forth because they need to fill out rosters and get special team players. So trying to
Yeah.
focus on some of the top players here. But one of the first things we tried to address was the receiver position here, and trying to find some good value overall, as they lost technically 3 pass catchers as well. But even though
Yeah.
they didn't provide too much overall statistical value overall last year, mainly because they both missed half the season. But Ryan, who were a couple of the receivers that we ended up signing in free agency at a pretty good deal?
Yeah, so we went with Greg Dortch was one. Just trying to replace that Kirk Cousins mold, add some speed. I believe we just did a 1 year, $4 million kind of like prove it deal.
Well,
Um,
he's young enough. He'll
it,
want multiple years, but
okay, so we
for
can
the
do
sake of
two.
it, well, okay, yeah. For the sake of it, though, it'd just
Yeah,
be about $4 million a year.
yeah.
Uh, besides
It
going into the numbers.
Yeah, and then the other guy that we added was in a very similar role, and that is Rondale Moore. He probably will be signing much more of like a 1-year deal just because he is coming off of a torn ACL.
Yeah.
But when he was on the field, he was a really explosive playmaker. Both of these guys are in the Christian Kirk mold, but we signed him to a $2 million deal. So not you save some money on that Christian Kirk deal, not really forking over a lot of money to these guys uh, in free agency. And you have Brian Thomas Jr. now. You paid Gabe Davis a lot of money this past offseason. You add a couple options here, and then that gives you a lot of flexibility in the draft, whether if Ted McMillan is there at 5 or whether you want to take Jaden Higgins at the top of the second. I believe they have 2 third-round picks in this year's draft.
Yeah.
So you could go and maybe take a wide receiver in that range as well, like a Jalen Royals. But it gives them a lot of flexibility. And you mentioned it with Will Campbell. Like if they want to go and get Will Campbell, he's not just going to be slotted into like an unfamiliar spot right away because they have a hole at right guard if they don't bring back Brandon Sheriff. So I like that the flexibility that getting these 2 wide receivers gives them is because they have 2 uh, NFL NFL experienced wide receivers. Um, so
Yeah.
next up, we're gonna add on to that offensive line. So we're gonna start with a older veteran guy with DJ Humphries. Um, just helps maybe solidify that left tackle spot where Walker Little will be playing. So we signed him to a 1-year, $3 million deal, just to kind of again add some depth there. This is a guy that hasn't really been able to stay healthy all that much as of late. And so I feel like adding him uh, just to be a veteran presence in that room, I think would be something that they could use.
Well, exactly. Just that swing tackle presence, because ideally it'd be Walker Little and Anton Harrison. They're the guys
Yeah.
that keep on developing, and then you are still going to be drafting guys in this upcoming draft, probably in round 3, round 4, like who are going to be tackle specific. Will Campbell, if that's the route you go with your 5th overall pick, he's probably going to kick in the guard. No guarantees, but a guy like
Yeah.
DJ Humphries, though, and even too, it's funny actually, like looking at our free agencies, we've gone with 3 former Arizona Cardinals, but when DJ Humphries was the Arizona Cardinals, like he was a solid offensive lineman for them, but he
Yeah.
got towards ACL towards the end of 2023, I believe. Yeah,
Yeah. Something like that.
and then nobody resigned him just because of like, or it's the end of 2022. But he had a bad timing ACL tear, and then nobody wanted to resign him because he was going to miss portions of the next season. Then he just has kind of stayed like this until Kansas City signed him halfway through this season as well. So you still got to go see him play. I think he could provide some good minutes, and also too, in the grand scheme of things, it's just a couple $1 million on a very short term deal. Like once you can make it very team friendly to where you can cut him even if it's a multi-year deal. So
Yeah.
I think still improving, just keeping on improving that offensive line and offensive line depth. I think another guy too as well. You can go after another guy in the state, but Liam Eichenberg as well. I think he's going to provide some versatility kind of throughout the entire offensive line and get him pretty cheap as well. Absolutely not. I like still looking to improve on, but once again for a rebuilding team, you're want to try and find some guys that can come in, provide some quality minutes and can help out some of the younger guys. And I think Eichenberg can do that.
Yeah, and he is a younger player too, so he's going to come in. You're going to give him a little bit of a longer deal, but also a guy I feel like that could definitely kick inside and kind of play for positions there. Where I believe at Miami he played all over the offensive line as well. So
Mhm.
it's going to be interesting to kind of see. Right now, we've really only added kind of like veteran role players, not a lot of big contracts, but the next guy still older but it's still a really solid player. We're going to go with Stephon Gilmore, kind of starting to address the defensive side of the ball here. He's just going to get a 1-year, $7 million deal. Is an older corner, but again, in his prime, he was a former defensive player of the year, really solid man corner. And I think too, if you are the Jaguars at 5 and Will Johnson is there, signing Stephon Gilmore now is not going to prevent you from maybe drafting a Will Campbell over Will Johnson, or doing something like that. And so I feel like just getting him, adding that depth there, is going to be really important. This is not a guy also that has had a lot of injury issues throughout his career. I think he had 1 year with the Patriots where he missed like 4 or 5 games at the end of the season, but I do feel like that would be another good veteran signing to kind of bring in, maybe help mentor some young guys and help build this team.
Yeah, yeah, no, and very similar. I think to go and get DJ Humphries, but also to a minimum, the secondary room did struggle last year, and so you can come in and really outside Tyson Campbell, I think you can make an argument then like Stephon Gilmore can come in and be the number 2 cornerback as well, and still just keep on building, trying to find a good roster. How this roster is coming together is kind of reminding me of how Washington pieced together their roster last year with a lot of these older seasoned veterans who still had something left in the tank to come in, and then if things don't work out, then that's fine. Like you're just trying to piece
Yeah.
together a competent team, and I think that's the route that they can end up going. I think another guy too that they'll end up getting, who just became a free agent now, as the Cincinnati Bengals just released him, but Sheldon Rankins. I think you can plug him in there and start beefing up that defensive interior. The Jags have the edge rushers. I mean, they have Josh Walker. They have Josh Allen, and then they have Trayvon Walker. And so Josh Walker, he's not really that good. And so, but you want Trayvon Walker and Josh Allen here. And I think you go put Sheldon Rankins in the middle there, or at least another defensive tackle. It could be Rankins, it could be BJ Hill, who's also a free agent, or who's the other DJ Jones out of Denver, where you have some of this extra cap money, and you can go and start beefing up this defensive interior as well. Because if you can beef up that defensive interior and get a lot of one-on-one matchups with these 2 top edge rushers, I could really see the sack production improving a lot. Help out the secondary bunch in the pass game because people can get to the quarterback, making their decisions that much more hurried, and potentially even stopping any throws as well if they're getting sacks. So beefing up this defensive interior, I think, is going to be a huge one for them. And with Sheldon Rankins in the market, I think that could be a guy that they could go after and help out that defensive line. So I think
Yeah.
here, did we already pay him? How much are we looking at?
Yeah. We're looking at about $7 million. So they still
7
have
million.
31.5 million in cap space, and they've made a lot of additions. It's just been kind of small, like middle of the roster additions. And so like I'm kind of going through lists right now. Like they could be a potential like Drake Greenlaw landing spot. Another guy too that is gonna require a lot of money, but like let's say they go out and get Charvarius Ward. Um I guess that's not how you spell his name. Uh, but like he's going to want a multi-year deal, but I think if you give him like 12 million a year for over 2 years, that might be enough to kind of entice him. And then now you're kind of getting down into where you need to leave some cap space for your team there, and maybe go add a younger top corner to your roster rather than just Stephon Gilmore alone. And I actually think those two would complement each other very well, as they both
Yeah.
can play predominantly man coverage.
Yeah, that'd be interesting then too if they double dip then on the secondary side as well,
Mhm.
and just be like we're just going to try and find as great of players as possible. Maybe if they go Travarius Ward, they don't even go Stephon Gilmore. And so that's what's going to be
Yeah.
interesting with this Jags offseason. And then there's a lot of other kind of bottom tier guys that they can go and find to fill out the roster. And then they have 10 picks as well in this upcoming draft. So I think that they're going to be very effective
Mhm.
overall, especially too with the mighty Brit James Gladstone picking for them there as the youngest GM, and he's not actually Brit. I know
Yeah.
that. It's just James Gladstone, and then you look at him, he looks like he plays for like a level 2 Premier League team, and so he looks like a character from Ted Lasso. So, but I'm sure he's going to be great in this role. If you just go look at his resume and his pedigree as well, I mean, he was a part of a lot of very successful Rams drafts, and so I think
Yeah.
that's exactly what Jaguars need right now. So
Mhm.
it should be fun. It'll be an interesting offseason and draft for the Jaguars.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. I think with this free agency approach, kind of building up the middle class of that roster, especially at that 5th pick, I think that's going to be a pretty big wild card spot. Like you don't necessarily know who all is going to be there, and so I think they'll definitely be in a position to take the best player available on their board, or potentially move back. So let's go ahead. Let's wrap up this video here. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe. That is the best way to help out the channel. While you're down there, leave a comment on what you thought of this Jaguars mock free agency. Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you have done differently? And other than that, we'll see you guys next time.